During the 2024 season, there was a lot of races which were unpredictable in terms of who was going to actually win, which made a nice change from 2023 when we all knew Verstappen was going to win every race. And because of that, in 2024, sometimes the slower driver won, and sometimes chaos meant that a different driver won. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about 4 races where the wrong driver won. If you enjoyed the video, then please hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. Now, let's get into the video. Number 1, Max Verstappen at the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. Yep, starting it off with one of the obvious ones, and this race was one where Max Verstappen put on a defensive masterclass and held off a much faster Lando Norris in the McLaren. In the opening stages of the race, it was looking like a relatively straightforward race for Max Verstappen, as he led away from the beginning of the race, and early on it was looking like Verstappen was going to dominate, and everyone else was going to be left scratching their heads. He built up a solid lead over Lando Norris by about 7 seconds, but as we were getting to the back end of the Grand Prix, we saw something which, at the time, was something we had not seen in quite a while. The Red Bull, which in 2023 was excellent at keeping the tyres alive, was starting to struggle, as the hard tyres were dropping off in terms of pace and performance, whereas Lando Norris in the McLaren was keeping the hard tyres alive for a much longer period of time. Early on in the hard tyre stint, Lando Norris looked after the hards, and he was rewarded, because from lap 50 to lap 61, Lando Norris closed the gap by over 5 seconds, and by the end of the race, he was all over the back of Max Verstappen. This put Max under an immense amount of pressure. Lando Norris in the McLaren had much better tyres and was the faster car at that point. Verstappen could not afford to make one single error. One of the saving graces for Verstappen was Norris was pushing very hard, and when he got to the back of Verstappen, he was starting to slide through the Villeneuve chicane, but even so, he was still the faster car. Verstappen, though, did not make a mistake, and with Imola being such a difficult place to pass, Verstappen was able to take a very well-deserved victory. At many other circuits, Lando Norris would have beaten Verstappen because he would have been able to overtake him on track. Number 2, Max Verstappen at the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal. Yep, we are sticking with Max Verstappen winning races where he really should not have. And the next one was just 2 races after the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, as Max Verstappen managed to win a rain-soaked Canadian Grand Prix at Montreal. The race started off in soaking wet conditions, and George Russell led the early stages from Verstappen in 2nd place, and Lando Norris was in 3rd. During those early stages, Haas drivers Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg were on the full wet tyres and faster than everyone else, who was of course on the intermediate tyres. This is just to say how wet the race was at the beginning. As the rain started to ease off though, and the track started to dry out, Verstappen started coming under pressure from Lando Norris, and very quickly on lap 20, Verstappen lost 2nd place to Lando Norris and dropped to 3rd place. A lap later, Lando Norris then took the lead of the Grand Prix from George Russell. By lap 25, Verstappen was over 10 seconds behind Lando Norris. That means to say that from the end of lap 20 to midway through lap 25, Verstappen lost over 10 seconds to Lando Norris. Norris was absolutely dominating the Grand Prix at this point, but then Logan Sargeant crashed and the safety car came out. Norris and McLaren failed to pit in time, and Max Verstappen then took the lead of the Grand Prix, whereas Norris dropped to 3rd place after pitting. This was a massive own goal by McLaren. After this, it was difficult to do anything about Max Verstappen as the circuit dried out. After the final safety car, Russell stopped for a fresh set of medium tyres, but he made a meal out of overtaking Oscar Piastri, and he then lost out to Lewis Hamilton, meaning that any chance that George Russell had of winning the Grand Prix was gone, and Max Verstappen brilliantly won the Canadian Grand Prix. His race was essentially saved by a safety car after Logan Sargeant's crash, because, well, before then, Lando Norris was absolutely dominating the Grand Prix. But that safety car, followed by a mistake by McLaren not pitting straight away, cost them a valuable race win. Now, I know some people say that the safety car came out just after he passed the pit lane, but it was obvious that Logan Sargent had crashed, and McLaren still chose not to do anything. I just want to say, if you are enjoying the video so far, then I would really appreciate it if you hit the like button and subscribe for more F1 content. But now, let's get back to the video. Number 3, Charles Leclerc at the Italian Grand Prix. Yep, for once in this video, I am not going to be talking about Max Verstappen, and instead I'm going to be talking about someone else. And in my opinion, Charles Leclerc was not the fastest driver at Monza, and really shouldn't have won the race. But his brilliance, along with McLaren potentially making an unnecessary second stop with Piastri, led to Charles Leclerc winning the Italian Grand Prix. At the start of the race, Lando Norris led from Oscar Piastri at turn 1, but then Piastri put a brave move around the outside of Lando Norris to take the lead away from him. This overtake then cost Norris second place to Charles Leclerc. On lap 15, Norris stopped for hard tyres, and Charles Leclerc was about 3.5 seconds behind Piastri. Leclerc stopped a lap later, but he then lost position to Lando Norris, and by lap 31, Piastri had stopped as well, and had a 3-second gap to Lando Norris, who was also 1.7 seconds ahead of Charles Leclerc. It was at this moment that we heard on the team radio that Lando Norris was beginning to struggle with the hard tyres, and we saw him go off at the Della Roggia chicane. By lap 33, Lando Norris had to peel off into the pits for a second time as his tyres had grained up. It was Charles Leclerc versus Oscar Piastri then from here to win the Italian Grand Prix. But Piastri had a 5.5 second gap to Charles Leclerc, meaning that it was going to be a lot of work for Leclerc to beat the McLaren driver. McLaren then, it looked like, was struggling with graining. At least they were with Lando Norris, as was Red Bull and also Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. But somehow Charles Leclerc managed to keep his tyres alive, as did Oscar Piastri. At least that's what it looked like. By lap 38 though, Oscar Piastri was still leading, and the gap was 5.4 seconds. It looked like Piastri might have just dodged the graining phase that other drivers were suffering with. He had kept it on track for longer than others without suffering from any of that graining, but then on lap 39, he boxed and gave away the lead of the race to Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. By the final lap on lap 53, Oscar Piastri did work his way back up and get past Carlos Sainz, and he was within 3 seconds of Charles Leclerc, but it was just too much. I still don't really understand why they stopped Oscar Piastri. They could have taken a risk and kept him out. They essentially chose a safe option and guaranteed second place instead of risking victory. They were the faster car in the Grand Prix, and you can see that by the fact that both McLarens were leading somewhat comfortably for quite a while. But Norris then suffered with graining, and Piastri potentially could have gone through a graining phase, but he wasn't graining when they stopped him. And instead, they chose to pit and throw away a victory, handing it to Charles Leclerc. McLaren had the faster car, but once again failed to capitalise on it. Number 4, Max Verstappen at the Brazilian Grand Prix. Remember when I said chaos led to the wrong driver winning? Well, that is exactly what happened in Interlagos. Once again, we had a weather-affected race, but this time it was truly awful conditions, and Max Verstappen was starting in 17th place, with Lando Norris on pole position and George Russell in second place. Verstappen, in the early stages of the Grand Prix, was slicing his way through the field. All of his moves were clean and effective. Also starting towards the back of the field was his teammate at the time Sergio Perez, Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, and Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari. But Sainz, Perez and Hamilton couldn't make the moves as easily as Verstappen did, as Max was a man on a mission after being eliminated early in qualifying and being furious about it. By lap 11, Verstappen had gone from 17th place to 6th place, and he was only 10 seconds off of Lando Norris, who was in second place and 11 seconds off of George Russell, who was leading the Grand Prix. Verstappen was lightning fast, but surely he was not going to win the race after starting in 17th place. By lap 29, both Russell and Norris stopped for a fresh set of intermediates when the rain really started to fall heavily, whereas Esteban Ocon, Max Verstappen and Pierre Gasly all opted to stay out in the most difficult conditions on very used intermediates. A lap later, the safety car came out, followed by a red flag because Franco Colapinto crashed. This red flag essentially saved the race for Esteban Ocon, Max Verstappen and Pierre Gasly, as they were able to switch onto a fresh set of intermediate tyres for free. For Verstappen then, this meant that he had climbed all the way to second place from 17th, a somewhat unbelievable feat, but it was not over. When the race got back underway, things were actually looking very good for Esteban Ocon in the Alpine to win the race. He was keeping Max at bay, but on lap 39, Carlos Sainz crashed, bringing out the safety car once again. And this safety car meant that the gap that Ocon had built was washed away. When the race did get back underway for the final time, Max Verstappen made sure he got into the lead of the race, and Verstappen won brilliantly from 17th on the grid, whereas Norris, who was on pole, finished way down the order. So that is 4 races where the wrong driver won the Grand Prix. Is there any race from the 2024 season where you think a driver won, despite the fact that they probably shouldn't have? If you do think that, then in the comment section down below, please do let me know. Now, I know this video was somewhat negative towards McLaren, but it has to be said, McLaren made a lot of mistakes this season, but even so, they did still win the Constructors' Championship, but it does go to show that they could have won even more in the 2024 season. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, as always, then please comment, leave a like and subscribe for more F1 content. Thank you all so much for watching.